So I think it's fair to say that right now Star Wars gaming is in a very strange place. Sure, we have a bunch of games on the horizon, and Lucasfilm have said they want to release a new Star Wars game at least every 6 months. I haven't seen that happen yet. But I think right now is the kind of situation where we need to look at this as a glass half full rather than half empty. It's better to focus on what we're getting rather than what we don't have. Now, I grew up in what people call the golden era for Star Wars gaming. And back then, in the late 90s and early 2000s, it was kind of weird if you only got 2 Star Wars games in a single year. The norm was like 5. And then they were making mobile versions and handheld versions and a bunch of other stuff. I'm talking the original Battlefront 2 era, the old LEGO Star Wars games, Republic Commando, the Revenge of the Sith movie tie-in game, and all the other movie tie-in games they did, Star Wars Racer. There were so many games back then releasing, and younger fans I don't think really understand just how big a deal Star Wars gaming was. And even if some of the games were a bit rough around the edges, that was all part of the fun. Now, with all that said, it's still possible that we could be entering a new golden era of Star Wars gaming. And we're not there yet. We're a long way away from what we once had. But with everything on the horizon, there's still a chance this could happen. It's been a while since I've looked at all of the new up-and-coming Star Wars games, so I've tried to find as much about all of them as I possibly could, and I'm going to present that to you in today's video. We're going to talk about everything releasing this year, and then also into the beyond, and also everything that's kind of just released and the current state of Star Wars gaming, I want to say. If you can call it a state. Hey everyone, it's Andrew. Now, funnily enough, this year we're supposed to be getting at least 4 or 5 Star Wars games releasing. One of them is actually already released. It was the Phantom Menace PS5 port. Technically it's a release, but obviously this is a game that's 25 years old and still plays like it's 25 years old.
There are too many droids, we must retreat.
Later in February, we're also getting the Dark Forces Remaster, which is another similar style port. It's not really a remake of the game, and again, it's an older Star Wars game, but they're releasing it this year, so that makes 2. And then the next game that's supposed to be releasing this year is Star Wars Outlaws. Now, this thing is still set to release in the first half of 2024. There was a rumor recently saying there's a chance it could be delayed, which honestly isn't that surprising. No! Seems like a massive game they've been working on for years, and if they're saying it's the first open world Star Wars game ever, which technically isn't true,
And I want you to get out of this office right now.
then you'd assume it would have taken them quite a while to get to the stage of release. I honestly don't mind when games are delayed. It's much better than having them release a game that's completely unfinished. And before, how we were talking about the golden era of Star Wars gaming, kind of around that 2005 era, when they were releasing so many games per year, I don't think it's that easy to compare games from back then to games to now, because the requirements of making a fully fledged AAA title have kind of changed. The expectation of what that is has changed. And back then, they were a lot more graphically simple.
I got everything you need, huh?
Star Wars Outlaws, though, looks like it's going to be the big release of 2024. Kind of on the same level as a Jedi Survivor or Jedi Fallen Order. As far as we know, the game is single player only, but there's going to be a lot of player choice involved in terms of how you interact with the syndicates. People are comparing the reputation system in Star Wars Outlaws to Rockstar's Bully from 2006, where basically if you perform certain tasks for certain groups at school, then that would put you in the bad books of other groups. Basically, all of your actions with each faction or the syndicates will have some sort of effect, whether that be positive or negative. For example, you might do something really good for one syndicate, but then that puts you in the bad books of the other syndicate. It's also been said that your decisions in the game aren't actually going to affect the outcome of the story. As far as we know, Star Wars Outlaws has a linear story. There's a start, there's a finish, and that story apparently falls into the Star Wars canon. The game is set around the time the Empire Strikes Back, so when the Empire is at their peak, and what I'm most looking forward to, I think, is the GTA-style police system. I'm not sure how close to the wanted level system, like in a GTA game, it's actually going to be, whether they'll kind of tone it down to more of a Ubisoft-style wanted system. But the Empire will literally chase you down and bring in extra reinforcements if you increase your wanted level. They showed it to us in the gameplay demo that released months back now. And my main concern with this game is that it won't feel sandboxy enough. When designing an open world game, I think it's so important for the sandbox of the game to be freely explorable. You want to be able to create your own fun in the open world, which is what makes games like GTA and Red Dead so much fun. You can kind of go anywhere and do anything and create your own chaos and shenanigans. I think Hogwarts Legacy is a good example of how not to do it, and more of a rigid open world. Even though that game did a lot of things great in its world design and accurate representation of Hogwarts, the open world itself feels a bit sterile and bland, and that's why you can't really interact with everyone in the world. That's why you can't just go attack the kids with your wand, which is disappointing. So hopefully Star Wars Outlaws doesn't suffer from that same fate. I'm also not convinced about the story mode of Star Wars Outlaws, although I think it's too early to say. We don't know enough about the main character Kay Vess and her little companion Nyx. We don't know anything really about the BX Commando droid that's wearing the trench coat, apart from the fact that we all know he thinks he looks cool in it. But I think it's too early to say before we write anything off about the story. Some people are unhappy about female protagonists. It's like, alright, get over it. We got a Star Wars game, half glass full, people.
Stop it.
Now, if we're going off what Lucasfilm said about releasing at least 2 Star Wars games every year, then my guess is that Star Wars Hunters is going to be the other release of 2024. This has to be one of the weirdest Star Wars games ever made, because the game has been in soft launch for roughly 3 years, meaning it's playable in certain regions, but only in those certain regions and on certain devices. A lot of places still can't access this game. What's strange about this, though, is that on Twitter, if you're following their account, they're releasing updates for the game. Like, there's new content in this game basically every month, it feels like, for a game that most people aren't even able to play yet. That seems really strange. Star Wars Hunters is supposed to get a launch on the Nintendo Switch at some point. That will be, I think, around the official release date. So far, it's only available on mobile devices as far as I know. It's basically been playable here in Australia for about 2 or so years, but obviously in a very limited beta kind of version. The game is an arena shooter. It fits into the Star Wars canon because of this, and you can basically play as different classes, different heroes, if you want to say, all have different weapons and different abilities in the arena. Don't know if it's going to get an official release. Maybe it'll get cancelled before that happens. But I don't recall any other Star Wars game staying in soft launch in only a limited capacity for this long, so it takes the award for that. Now, this isn't a Star Wars game, but I think it deserves a mention in this video. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is set to release in 2024. We all know Indiana Jones is part of Star Wars, don't we? Everyone accepts it.
It's me.
And this one I'm honestly really excited for. It's primarily played in first person, developed by Machine Games, who created the Wolfenstein games. I found my copy of Wolfenstein. I haven't played this in like 10 years, but it's fun. And I recently just made a full video talking about the Indiana Jones game and everything you need to know about it. So if you want to know more about Indy and what he's up to in this new adventure, which does fall into the Indiana Jones canon as well, then go watch that video after you watch this. So as far as 2024 is concerned, at the moment, those are all the Star Wars games we're getting. But beyond that, there are a total of 6 confirmed Star Wars games on the horizon currently being developed. And the first of those that I'm going to talk about is a first-person shooter from Respawn. Now, Respawn in more recent years are probably more well-known for Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, but they of course also developed Apex Legends and the Titanfall games. And as far as I know, the studio is still led by Vince Zampella, who is literally one of the founders of Call of Duty. So when it comes to a first-person shooter set in the Star Wars galaxy and Vince Zampella's involved, and it's being developed by Respawn, who have a great track record with shooters in recent years, I'm excited.
Oh yeah. It's all coming together.
Now, through a bunch of job listings, it has been confirmed that the game is being built in Unreal Engine 5, which basically means it's going to look stunning, and is also multiplayer.
Oh my god! Okay, it's happening!
Similar to, I guess, the Titanfall games, who a lot of people say had great campaigns. I've never actually played them. Apparently the story modes are supposed to be really good. Respawn have also said in some of those job listings I mentioned that the game is going to feature a story-driven single player. So it seems like the story, I guess, will be the main part of the game, and then multiplayer will be additional. Perhaps it's both. Perhaps they're doing the Call of Duty thing, or I guess the Titanfall thing, and it's going to feature both. Now, in addition to the first-person shooter, Respawn are also working on a Star Wars strategy game in development with BitReactor, who's a new studio that's put together by some of the leading strategists in the field of video game development. As far as we know, this game is supposed to be some kind of RTS and is potentially inspired by the XCOM series. However, very little is known about this game. Now, in addition to both these games, Respawn are also working on Star Wars Jedi 3, the third game in the trilogy. What's weird about that is that Stig Asmussen, who was the lead dev on both Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, has left Respawn. He's no longer working there, and he was largely responsible for the direction of these games and for the reason they ended up how they did, with, I want to say, memorable stories.
I'm sure the Emperor won't mind if I deliver you to him in pieces.
What?
and some pretty satisfying Metroidvania Souls-like gameplay. The third Jedi game is of course going to continue the story of Cal Kestis and will likely pick up sometime after the events of Jedi Survivor, and if the last two games are anything to go by, will probably release sometime around 2026 or 27. Now, you might be concerned that Respawn are potentially spreading themselves too thin. How do they have the resources to develop all of these Star Wars games in addition to maintaining development on Apex Legends and also whatever else they're working on in the background? Well, we've known that internally Respawn has multiple different teams. They have the Apex Legends team, they have a Star Wars FPS team, they have a Star Wars Jedi team, and then however many people are working on this RTS Star Wars game. But it seems like a lot for one single studio to be working on 3 Star Wars games when we've barely had any Star Wars games, it feels like, in recent years compared to what it used to be like. But I think if these 3 games are to be successful, we know that the third Jedi game likely will be, considering the hype around the Jedi games, and a Star Wars first-person shooter sounds amazing. And this is part of the reason why I think we could be entering a new golden era for Star Wars games. I don't know if you guys remember, there was actually a first-person shooter that was supposed to release around 2012, 2013, around the time the Disney transition took over, and this thing never got released. It was called Star Wars First Assault, and apparently it was only 1 week away from being shipped. Really disappointing, we never got to play this, but I think we can all agree that we'd love a first-person shooter Star Wars game. But that's not all we have to be excited about. You might remember a few years back, there was a Star Wars project that went by the code name Project Ragtag. It was in development at Visceral Games, which is one of EA's former studios and was shut down around 2016 or 17. Project Ragtag was set to be some kind of scoundrel bounty hunting adventure game, a third-person action-adventure RPG, and it seems like that we still could get this game in some capacity. Because back in 2022, it was announced that Amy Hennig, who was working on this game and had previously worked on the Uncharted series, was setting off to make a new Star Wars game with her new studio, Skydance New Media. Now, this studio was actually founded in 2019, which means they could have been working on this game for at least 5 years now, without us really knowing too much about it. All we know is that it's likely going to be a third-person action-adventure game, similar to the Uncharted games, I guess, or similar to Star Wars Outlaws in some ways. And if the cancelled Project Ragtag is anything to go off, you won't be playing as a Jedi-style character, just like in Star Wars Outlaws. You're going to be playing as some kind of scoundrel bounty hunter. Perhaps it'll be the Star Wars 1313 that we never got. So there are 2 more Star Wars games still on the horizon that I haven't mentioned yet, but both of them, just be warned, are controversial in their own ways.
Do it.
The first of those is Star Wars Eclipse. This one is being developed by Quantic Dream, who you might remember created Detroit Become Human, Beyond Two Souls, and also Heavy Rain. This game is supposedly set in the High Republic era, but what's problematic about it is that they literally released this trailer just to get talent to come to the studio and work on the game. It was basically an ad for developers to come and work on a Star Wars game at Quantic Dream, and might in the end not represent anything about the story. Yoda, who appears in the trailer, might not be in the story at all. As far as I know, it's kind of just a bit of cinematic fluff, which still looks cool and is still exciting in some ways, but this game is likely still years and years away, as far as I know. It's been in development for a while, but there was trouble around actually getting it made because they were struggling to hire staff. That said, as far as I know, it is supposed to be Quantic Dream's next game, and I'm pretty sure they haven't released anything since Detroit Become Human, which was quite a few years ago now. What's interesting about this one as well is that we're not really sure how it will fit into the Star Wars canon. Most of Quantic Dream's games up until this point have multiple narratives and multiple decisions you can make in the game which affect the outcome of the story and the actions that the characters take. That, we're assuming, will likely be the case in this new game as well. So whether there's just one timeline or one story which they count as the Star Wars canon, or somehow the events that unfold in your version of the narrative don't affect the canon, maybe it'll just fall outside of canon, which I think is totally fine. I kind of miss games with alternate endings. What about the alternate ending for the Revenge of the Sith video game where Anakin kills Obi-Wan and the Emperor? What about some of the DLCs for The Force Awakens, where you can literally go and kill Han Solo and Luke Skywalker as Starkiller? That stuff is amazing. And gaming should be about fulfilling fantasies, having fun, and making your own choices which don't have to affect the overall outcome of the Star Wars ever-expanding galaxy.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
And then the other new up-and-coming controversial Star Wars game is the Knights of the Old Republic remake, which, as far as we know, is still in development. It was a little shaky there for a while and we didn't really know what was happening with this thing. As far as we know, though, it is supposed to be in development right now at Saber Interactive. It was previously being developed by Aspyr, who were responsible for all of the ports, for example, Republic Commando, Star Wars Racer, and the KOTOR Remake is supposed to be a PlayStation and PC exclusive. Things have been a little quiet about KOTOR for a while now, but as far as anyone knows, it is still happening. It's probably just many years away and hopefully doesn't get cancelled. Okay, but let's say you want to go play a Star Wars game today, tomorrow, this afternoon.
Let him cook!
What are you gonna do? Because it also seems strange that right now there's no Star Wars games with a live service. I also was expecting Star Wars Jedi Survivor to get a combat challenges style arena mode similar to what Jedi Fallen Order had, but many months have passed and anything like that is still yet to be announced. Like I said at the start of this video, it's probably better to look at the glass half full rather than half empty to appreciate what we do have rather than what we don't. And Jedi Survivor, I guess you could argue, did have a decent amount of replayable content. Battlefront 2 is also still live in some capacity. You can still play the game online at certain times and find decent sessions of players, but the Battlefront 2 modding community is outrageous. The stuff those guys create, the fantasies they fulfill in Battlefront 2, the content we never got is truly impressive, and I've made a bunch of videos about that recently. You can go check some of that stuff out. But if you have Battlefront 2 on PC, I definitely recommend going and checking out some of the mods, just for a bit of fun to get your Star Wars fix of gaming while we wait for these new Star Wars games to release. There was another live service Star Wars game that released a few years back though, Star Wars Squadrons, and I don't know if anyone's still playing this. I'm curious, are you still playing Star Wars Squadrons? Do you know if anyone is? Maybe I'll go check it out. Maybe I'll make a video about that at some point.
This might be a real challenge after all.
LEGO Star Wars Skywalker Saga is also completely done for content, it seems. There was kind of a tiny little update last year, but beyond that, the game is finished. And TT Games have moved on to whatever next LEGO game they're making, and it does seem like there are other LEGO games on the horizon with the release of LEGO 2K Drive, LEGO Fortnite, and a bunch more. But that's also the problem for Star Wars gaming in recent years. We have to rely on big games like Minecraft or Fortnite for any kind of Star Wars content. Don't get me wrong, the Fortnite Star Wars updates are kind of fun, and grinding out the skins can be good and getting the lightsaber and everything, but it's really not the experience we've been wanting and waiting for so many years. Star Wars Minecraft Path of the Jedi DLC honestly impressed me and surprised me. I didn't expect it to be quite as fun or as good as it was. It's basically a Jedi simulation where you can explore the Jedi Temple and go on a bunch of different quests. It's good for 3 or 5 hours of fun if you haven't checked that out. The Old Republic is still going. People are still playing the Old Republic. If you're looking for an MMORPG, you want to be online a lot, you want to build your character, go play the Old Republic. And this is probably one of the most obscure Star Wars games, but LEGO Star Wars Castaways does still get some content updates. There is Star Wars content in this game. There was some recent Clone Wars stuff. It's good for a bit of light LEGO fun. The game is a bit of a grind at times. And yes, it's not quite the AAA Star Wars game you're probably hoping for. So while we all wait for the next Star Wars game to release, and while we wait for what will hopefully be the next golden era of Star Wars gaming, go play your favorite Star Wars game from when you were a kid. And let me know what that was in the comments. And if you haven't already, check out some mods and go watch this video with everything you need to know about the new Indiana Jones game. Also, follow me on Instagram. I'm there. Go follow me. I might give you a game at some point. And thanks for watching this. My name's Andrew. I'll catch you soon.